today we're starting our next cosplay tutorial series. I'm gonna be a Mew Mew! This is Tokyo Mew Mew a la mode. This is the spin-off of Tokyo Mew Mew. It never got its anime version, as you guys saw within the last year or so. Tokyo Mew Mew got an updated version, so I'm doing Mew Berry, which is this lovely girl here on the cover. I don't know if she's gonna ever get her anime debut, but I hope she does, because look at her! She's gorgeous, and she's me. So first things first, I'm basically doing this whole thing from scratch. This is the first time I'm actually following a pattern that someone else created. I'm not good at patterns, but we're gonna get through this together. So the pattern I'm using is from Crystal's Cosplay Closet, which is a pattern on Etsy. As you can see here, as I zoom away, this pattern is pretty big. It's as big as my cutting board. So to start off, you'll go to etsy.com, just search for Crystal's Cosplay Closet Ichigo pattern. We're going to be working on the top for this video, part 1. And basically, as she instructs, make sure your printing instructions are correct, and you're going to be basically taping it side by side, going left to right. Starts at 1, ends at 5, and as you can see as I go down, it's pretty self-explanatory. So you'll tape them side by side. There's no need to change margins or anything, and I believe it was like $10 when I bought it on Etsy, so it's a really good deal, and you'll see later on after I cut it out that it's a really simple pattern to look at. This is me cutting the pattern here. Take your time. I'll explain a little bit later in the tutorial, but I'm not cutting where the big black lines are. There's a lighter line that you're cutting against. That's where the seam allowance is, and I'll explain that a little bit later. What you'll basically need is some scissors. You'll need both fabric scissors and cutting scissors. One for your papers and test fabrics, things like that, and then your actual fabric scissors. Your sewing machine, matching threads, fabric that you can mess up and play with, the fabric you want to actually make the garment with, and of course, just anything else you'll need, like a ruler, water-soluble marker, which you'll see later on in the tutorial when we actually trace the patterns out. It's good for tracing and getting rid of the lines quickly so you can see how things go from there. Also, pinking shears, seam ripper if you need it, and of course time and patience, because this thing is going to be a long time. But again, we're in the testing phase, so it should be pretty easy after that point. Also meant to show with these patterns, as you can see, there's a dark line here and an even lighter line here. You'll want to be cutting around this lighter line because this is what's called the seam allowance. So basically the amount of room that you'll give the pattern to be out to be sewn onto. So when you're cutting this out, don't cut on this black line, this dark black line. You want to be cutting right here on this lighter line as you go along. These are the pieces you're going to be needing for the top. Some of them might get cut off, but you're going to need the bodice side front, bodice front, the bodice back, and the bodice side. I know that side got cut off, but this is the pieces that you will be needing for the top. Now, since we're doing Mew Berry, for her top, it's not the exact same as Ichigo's. It doesn't have this little point thing at the bottom. So what we're gonna do, you can take a piece of tracing paper and trace the pattern one more time, so that way it only reflects from here to about here, just before you start getting into the deep triangle down there. What I love about this pattern, their instructions are also right on there, so you'll cut 2 for the actual fabric itself and 2 for the lining that's going to go underneath. So for what we're going to practice with, I'm going to use the rest of my Draculaura fabric, both for the lining and the self, and we'll see how that goes. Here I'm tracing with the water-soluble marker. As you can see, if you look a little bit closer, I'm using the line with the seam allowance, so that lighter line that I talked about earlier, to trace the pattern. Like I said, with Ichigo's pattern, we don't need her full frontal area there, so I traced about halfway down, and that gave me the length that I mostly needed. And you'll see later on in the tutorial that it didn't quite match up, so I needed to go a little bit longer. But honestly, after you trace it out, I just made like markings like a F for the front, FS for the side, so you just make sure that you're labeling what parts you're cutting out so it's easier for you to remember. And the water soluble marker helps because when you put it in the wash, it'll come right off. So yeah, just take your time cutting out each piece, and then I'll show you how to put them together. Right now I'm pinning the fabrics together. This piece I'm holding right here is the bodice front. I forgot to mention in the previous 2 seconds ago that you make 2 of the same pattern flipped over. So you'll do one side front end lining, and then you'll flip it over and do other side front end lining. So this is the very middle that will go across my chest. I'm going to pin down the side bodices here, and then I'll show you what it looks like all sewn together. Here I'm pinning the right sides together. You press the right sides together. You take your pins and go all the way up and all the way down on all sides, except for like the very top, which you'll sew that down later. But you just make sure that you don't leave any gaps. If you have them, you can use wonder clips. They'll hold the fabric a little more together rather than a pin that may cause some sliding and such. I do have wonder clips, but I didn't have them when I was recording, so you just pin down each side, and then I'll show you what we're doing next. You're basically just sewing with a straight stitch, going all the way down. Start with your back stitch to make sure it stays closed, and then you just sew down a little bit at a time, taking a pin out as you go. And next, I'm going to teach you about pinking shears and how they help. Lastly, after you're done sewing the whole bodice together, you're going to take your pinking shears. These are a special pair of scissors where they have like this jagged edge, and you just go along any of your raw edges and just snip them off. So I ended up Googling it. Pinking shears, they basically help fabrics like these where they're very loosely woven, and they stop them from fraying. So we're gonna put it on my mannequin and see how it looks. This is the test bodice. I am leaving my flaws because with flaws, that's how we learn. As you can see, some areas I should have either sewn a little bit more or made some more fabric, but it's a really good first try. After we made our practice bodice and make our real bodice. So, if you haven't seen the last video, take a step back and come back here and you'll pretty much know what to do after that. But let's show a little bit more tips to help our bodice become more neat compared to the test one. First, you're going to start off with your lining fabric. If you don't feel like going to grab a big giant ironing board, you can take a towel, put it on top of your cutting board, and that'll do just as well. Just make sure you're ironing on the towel itself. as I went along, I just moved the fabric left and right until I got all the wrinkles out. So just take your time as you're doing this. And yeah, this will help later on in the future because it'll help your fabrics lay a lot neater than how you have it. After you finish ironing down your lining fabric, you're going to do the same with your main fabric that you're going to have on the front. But like I said, this helps in the future, so that way everything turns out a lot more neater. After ironing your lining fabric, you're going to iron your main fabric, which for me, I'm going to use a really light color satin. Since my top fabric is a satin, I'm basically ironing on the matte side. That is the proper side you're supposed to iron on. If you don't feel like messing your fabric with a wet cloth, with not wet, but damp cloth, a lot of people use that, but I don't trust myself, so they said the alternate method is using cotton. So I just use the rest of my lining fabric, basically iron two things at once. Then you're going to take your pattern pieces, pin it to your fabric. At the top is what's called the grain line, so you want to make sure that your grain line and the top of your fabric where the selvage edge, so the edge with the holes on the fabric, are lined up together. Take your scissors, be as close to the pattern as you possibly can, but of course not cutting it, and cut it out. You'll see later on I took the scissors and just made little tidbits and little measurements and whatnot, making sure this is as accurate as you can possibly get it. But yeah, take your time with each part, of course, and then I'll show you what to do next. I put the two pieces I cut out on top of my makeshift bodice here. As you can see, they're basically identical. So, you're going to do this again for all the parts. You pin them down, cut it as accurate as possible, and then we'll pin it up, sew it up, and I'll show you what that looks like. Alrighty, y'all. I don't know if I showed it in the last video, but we're going to be sewing certain pieces together. So first, you're going to be sewing the grain line of the bodice front. Then you'll sew the outer edge of your side piece to the outer edge of your front piece. Put it together. These are your seam allowances here on your sewing machine. For our lining is what we're going to be sewing first. I think I'm going to go for the 4/3 seam allowance. So that's this line right here. And I'll show you how to put it on with the fabric. With your seam allowances, since your fabric's basically going to be coming in from the left, you can also look at it here from the right. So as you can see, right here, there is another 4/3 line. So that's this line right here. You just bring your fabric in from the left, put it under your foot up to this line, then you stamp it down and sew. For pattern reference, this is the bodice front. This is the grain line, so when we cut it out, it's just the way the fabric is facing. You'll be sewing down this front line here. Don't worry about this back end just yet, because that's going to be the part that you attach to your bodice side. After you sew the middle of your bodice front, you're going to take one of your bodice sides, and basically you just match petal to petal. So top of the petal of our bodice front starts up here. Open it up. You'll do one side, sew it along the edge of your bodice front. You're going to do it inside out, so that way when I put it together, it'll pop out in the middle. So basically you'll have the two right sides facing together. Pin it all the way down as far as you can, sew it up, and I'll show you what that looks like. This is what your bodice is going to look like. So you have your front, which is right here, a side, and a side. So then, we're going to work on the back. Same thing, you're going to sew right sides together, like this. sew those two sides together. Then same for this thing. Once these are sewn together, you're going to take these two sides, sew right sides together, sew it down, and then I will show you what the full bodice looks like. This is our lining bodice. It looks a lot better than the test bodice. I made it longer in the front for a reason, so don't worry about the length on that. We're gonna fix that a little bit later. This is the front, this is the back, this is how it should be looking. So then, after you finish your lining bodice, you're gonna take your main fabric, make a bodice out of that, and then I'll show you what to do next. Next, you're going to take the top of your fabric and pin the right sides together. Right sides is basically this shiny side with the outside of it. After pinning, you sew it up. After stitching your fabrics together, you're going to do what's called understitching, which is basically going to help this thing lay a little bit flat. So first what you do, you take the edge of the fabric and cut it in half, go all the way around, and then we'll make little slits. Don't cut too close to your seam line because you're going to need that room. Next, you make slots like this about every 1/4. Keep your fabric to the left of the machine, and you're going to be pulling and basically sewing down in a straight line until you reach the end. After sewing the bottoms, you're going to take your fabric from the side seam and turn it right side out. Finish your edges while cutting with pinking shears. Still with your zipper upside down, pin it down, and this is Tokyo Mew Mew Part 3. We are going to get started on the skirt. This is the pattern I'm using. It is from the creator Tori and C on Etsy. They also have a video tutorial to go along with it. So again, this is a long pattern. I can't even show it all the way through, so I'm just guiding down so y'all can see how the portions are supposed to be taped. We're going to cut out everything and continue. This is how the pattern came out. I cut a little bit bigger than what the pattern originally had, just because it goes to about 30 inches. I'm about 34 inches, so I added, as you saw, lines to the original pattern, cut out a lot bigger, and so this is what we came up with. So then after you cut out this, you'll cut out the other two halves, and I'll show you what that looks like. This portion right here is the sizing guide, which again, essentially as you cut this out, make sure your pattern is the correct sizing. Again, this pattern only goes to about a 30-inch waist, so if you have the room, cut way bigger if you need it. So yeah, and I stuck with the solid line, but I added more room around each side. So that's how we're gonna do this, and then I'll show you what the other parts look like after they're cut out. Alrighty, y'all, this is how your pattern is supposed to come out to. There is an optional line on the big portion here. It's a leg band. You don't have to cut it out. If you'd like, you can. But essentially, you'll be doing what we did with the rest of the pieces. Cut them out, according to your body shape. If you need more room, give more space around the lines. As you see with this guy here, the lines ended here, but I went way bigger because I'm I'm on the chubby side. So as much room as I possibly can on all four sides. But after you cut it out, you're going to attach it to the fabric according to the instructions. So anything that says outer shell will be your main fabric, and then anything that says lining is going to be the fabric inside the puff. Alright, so you cut it out against your fabric, and I'll show you what that looks like. So I just wanted to show off the pattern. I need to trim it some more in some places, but with each piece, it's going to tell you which fabric to be using. So for this piece, this is your lining fabric. So this is the lining fabric that I'm using, and it's going to tell you how many to cut. So as I cut this out, normally my selvage is out here. You cut the fabric out and then just make sure that it's facing the same way. So that, and then I also wanted to show where it says cut two. A lot of people think cut two of the exact same way, but what they actually mean is cut one out with the pattern as is, and then for the second piece you'll flip the pattern over, and that way you get a mirror of this. So you cut out one as is, and then you flip the pattern over and cut that piece out of the fabric, so that way, like these guys over here, you'll have not one but two separate pieces. And then I'll show you guys how to piece everything together before we sew. Okay, y'all, so this is the tricky part of the tutorial. I was trying to follow the online tutorial that Toriander had made. However, it doesn't go too much into detail on how to actually show you how to put them together. So the way she explained it is that first you'd have to sew together the center seams on both portions. So the top portion up there is the front. This is the back. On the back here, it looks like the curved edge on the outer side is going to be our zipper line. So I'm going to leave this portion blank for a while. And then she says, make sure on the back side that we cover this dart area, which I didn't pin it, but essentially you just sew those in a little, and you'll sew up this section between both sides. You'll sew the front between both sides. I'll show y'all what that looks like. This is the frontal piece. When you sew, you're going to sew curved edge to curved edge. So this piece to the right side of this piece, and it'll look like this. Open it up, it'll look like this. Then take your back piece, find where the zipper line is on the pattern, and put a pin where that's supposed to go. As you can see, both pieces have pins in it. That's where our zipper line is going to end. Make sure when you're pinning front to back that the right sides, for me this is my shiny side, which is the correct side, are facing together. Make sure the left side is on the left and the right side is on the right. Make sure the curved edge is touching the curved edge for the back side. So, right sides touching each other. Make sure the curved edges are together. Curved edges are together. And then you're going to sew the back side all the way up until these pins. Don't sew here, and don't sew past these pin points. I didn't sew it yet, but leave the crotch area exposed. This is what I got after sewing all the side seams together, again leaving the crotch as is. As you can see, I'm kind of lazy, and what I'm going to do when I wear this is wear a tulle skirt underneath. In the next tutorial, we will be sewing up the crotch area and gathering around the waist as well as the leg holes to make it look neater. Continuing on with our lovely pattern here, since the selvage edge essentially is down here about where my feet are, normally what you're supposed to do is line up this big arrow right here to the selvage edge, but my fabric is slightly too short, so for this pattern I had to turn the pattern slightly sideways. I'm hoping that doesn't mess up things, but I don't believe it will too much. So after you open up your fabric, you're going to lay it down, pin the pattern to the fabric, cut it all out. Make sure, again, since we have to cut two pieces, you'll cut out one, flip the pattern itself over, and cut it out on the rest of your fabric, and I'll show you what that all looks like. Before we go back to our main fabric over here, we're going to work on our lining fabric. So, to sew the crotch area, if you look at the pattern, you'll see a section where it has a dip, and then, our zipper area, and then another dip going straight down. These edges, where it goes straight down in a line, are going to be kind of uneven. So you're going to first pin all these together, sew straight down, and then just make sure that you have a space in the middle when it's all together. So make sure it's two separate parts. I'm going to just sew it down with a straight stitch, and I'll show you guys what it looks like with the pants on. Alright, so right now I'm holding it, as you can see, because I didn't install the zipper. But these are how the pants came out. We sewed the crotch area. So now we're going to attach this to our main fabric. We're still not installing the zipper until the very end. So for now, you can just put these aside and we'll work on the outer fabric. So just showing you guys the sewing of the inner portion of the fabric. So again, we had our straight line, we went straight down, and so when you open them, you should have spacing similar to this. You'll have a leg hole here, a leg hole here. It'll be taller in the front, shorter in the back, and this will be the area for your zipper, right about here. Okay, so now we're going to go back to the main fabric and see how to attach it to this before installing the zipper. Okay, so this is our lining fabric from the back side. We have our crotch area sewn in the front. For the outer fabric, I have the back area here. Your front is way down here because we have to do a lot of gathering. That's fine. So, to attach one to the other, you're just going to have them going the same way. What I would do is start with the zipper area, find the pattern on each side, pin it up, make sure everything matches, and so you're going to pin it together as close as you can, so match up side to side so all of this stays together. Make sure you're keeping your front away from your back as you pin, and I'll show you what this all looks like all pinned together before we put it under the machine. Just going over a quick synopsis of the darts. You're going to take your pattern, lay it over the area up the back where they're supposed to be. So right here is about this area, so I put 2 pins at the top. Then after laying them up there, I stuck a pin just straight down like this, and then I lifted the fabric just a little bit so I could see where that pin was, stuck a pin there, and you'll do the same thing for the other side, and I'll show you how to sew the dart. When you get to your machine, you're going to start with a back stitch. Go forward until you're about 5/8 of an inch on the point here where I have this green pin. When you get closer to your pin, sew a smaller stitch, the smaller the better. When you get to the final point, leave the point open. Repeat for the other side and you got it. Before we attach our main fabric to our lining fabric, we're going to do a little bit of practice. I'm using my gathering foot to see how the gathers are going to be, because essentially we have to gather the outer fabric to line up with our inner fabric. So we're going to practice with this just to see how it looks before messing with the real. Okay y'all, so this is the test I did. For this portion of it, I pulled the gathers in. This one I let the gathers go as is, and then it looks like it just trailed off towards the end. I'm using again my gathering foot, but I definitely like how this portion looks with the gathered pulled in. So what we're going to do before we attach the main fabric to our lining, we're going to gather the whole entire main fabric so it's way smaller, and then we'll put it against our lining fabric and see how it looks. This is how your skirt's gonna look once you started gathering everything. I'm going to flip the skirt inside out so you can see the pinning between the lining and the skirt fabric. So here is where the crotch area is. The hole is going to be where our zipper goes, and this is the top of the back of the fabric. Essentially, you're going to sew all that up. Remember, leave the hole for the zipper. These are the leg holes at the bottom. Remember to pin the lining to the outer fabric and make sure that your legs would be able to go through once it's sewed. I'm just going to be sewing both of these with a straight stitch, and we'll put it all together. These are how the parts turn out. Part 5, we're going to work on accessories. So honestly, with the skirt section, I was going to put a yoke on top of it. However, based off the design, you probably won't see it, so I'm not going to worry about putting a yoke on top anymore. So now, we're going to work on the big giant bows that you see in the picture on the bottom left, and we'll get that started. So, as you can see on my lovely old manga here, she has 2 hip bows, 1 and 2 hidden under her arm here. So as you can see, they're about as wide as her. So what we're going to do is essentially measure from the front of our body to about halfway towards the back of our body, and then we will be making it out of satin as well as horsehair braid. I believe this is the 2-inch size, but let me measure. Yep, so this is our 2-inch size. I also have some 1-inch as well, just in case we run out. So again, what we're going to do, we're going to measure the area on the side of our body. Once you have that measurement, you're going to be basically stacking the horsehair braid here to about as wide as your measurement, and then I'll show you what to do next.
Stand and get measurements from stomach to hip. Mine's was 8 inches. Measure horsehair braid from top of hip to halfway down thigh. Once measurement found, cut it and measure more strips and cut same size. Lay them side by side till they total 8 inches.
Now that we have our 8 pieces of horsehair braid, we're going to take 4 at a time, so 4 for one bow, 4 for another bow. You're going to sew them side by side, because again, when they're all together, it should total to 8 inches as I measured. So to sew them together, essentially, we'll probably use a zigzag stitch just so it crosses between both sides.
For this section, I recommend sewing one edge over the other and sewing over the area twice for stronger hold. Trim off excess.
Next, we're going to get our fabrics together. I measured a piece that's 8 wide and 24 long. You're just going to sew down, straight down on each side and flip it inside out. After you make your fabric tubes, you're going to make sure that your horsehair braid, if I lift it, it's about here, is nice and center. Then you're going to fold the fabrics in half like this, again making sure it's even. Then you'll seal up the sides and then we can continue. This is the little bow we made. It is so cute and just the right size that I wanted, right up against my hip here. So what I used to tie it in the middle was just a piece of the selvage of the same fabric, but we're going to cover this with more satin as one ring. Yeah, it's literally the perfect size. I wanted it to be right between my stomach and my hip. So it's literally perfect. So this is the next section. I basically made another tube of fabric. I didn't measure this one, but I believe it's about 2 inches long when it's folded. And essentially all we're going to do is wrap it over the selvage portion of the bow. Sorry y'all, can't keep it on me. But essentially, take the fabric, you're gonna wrap it around the selvage. Should look something like this. All I'm going to do is stitch behind the bow, cut off the excess, do the same for the other bow, and then we can attach these to the skirt by safety pins, and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so now we're going to start pinning these to our pants here, so that's why I have them on. I honestly opened the safety pin, and make sure you have the extra large size, just so we can have the pin. Be careful, you don't want to poke yourself, so gently find the area that you want to pin, stick it in, and then you're going to close and see how it hangs. Both of these bows are very light. Of course you can adjust as you're walking, as you're taking pictures, but this is about the area I wanted my bow. So then you repeat for the other side and I'll show you what it looks like. Alrighty, these are how our hip bows turned out. Oh my gosh, super excited. This is exactly where I wanted them to be, and of course, if you don't like it, you can change them. Again, these are super, super light. You cannot feel them at all on the hips, which is great. I wanted to show you today, friends, that learning from your mistakes helps you grow better as a cosplayer. So my dumb self, looking back at my previous video, I was like, yay, the pants are done. And then I looked, I was like, oh my god, there's no puff there. So to remedy my tiny mistake, let me show you what I did. Long story short, I had just the tiniest bit of my gather come apart in the front, which honestly worked out great because I had no puff inside of my pants. So what I did, I have a blue tutu. You can get them cheap from Party City, Amazon. I took a tutu and literally just cut down the back, and I pushed one to one side and one to the other side until I get a nice even amount of puff to fill that in. So now all I'm going to do with this section is gather it again, sew this on top. So now we're going to work on other accessories. She has a cattail, bunny ears, as well as more ribbons that go around her legs and so forth. For the ears here, as well as her tail that I have here, I'm gonna show you guys what listings I bought from Amazon. This is the ears that I bought, and this is the tail that I bought. Her wig here I got from Shein. I don't believe they have this size more, but honestly, if you look up long blonde wig, this one was the 40-inch wig that they have on there, so this is what I'm going to be using. This is everything that we have so far. Next in the tutorial, we're going to do her thigh band, armbands, gloves, shoes, and her necklace. We're going to start off with the choker, and I'll show you everything you'll need. Just going to slowly pan everything. For ribbons, I have the 1.5 inch size and the 2 1/4. These are going to be wired ribbons, so as you can see by this guy here, there's a tiny piece of ribbon right here where my nail is. So you want the wired ribbon and a ruffled lace, preferably one with a scalloped edge. So if you look at these guys, scalloped edge means it goes like I call them hoops, so like this. So before we begin, you're going to get the measurement of your circumference of your neck. Start here, hold, go around. Don't want it too tight. I have a little bit of spacing. So my number is 14 inches. Everybody's necks are different, so you just have to measure out your pink ribbon to that length, and I do maybe an inch more, so about 15, just in case. So as you can see here, we took the ribbon, measured it out, and I took 2 strips of lace to each side, and as you can see here, I pinned them together. So the pinned side is going to be your underside, because when you flip, you don't see the white. So you'll sew where these pins are, so you know, sew a straight line. When it's done, you're going to sew in some Velcro, because I feel like that's the easiest thing to never come off while you're walking or talking or anything like that. So I took 2 small pieces of sew on Velcro. Remember to have the Velcros in the correct order, so when I close this, you want your Velcros to touch, so this is what you want. You're going to sew all the way down on both sides, and here too. And then, at the same time, you can also do your thigh band. Same thing, take the measurement of your thigh. You're going to cut out your ribbon to that length, as well as your lace. Make sure you pin one side, and again the other side, sew it down. You're going to put Velcro on the back side. Now with the thigh band, I also suggest putting either a sock glue or a double-sided glue to attach it to your leg, because you know, as you walk, things will shift, and so this is just ways to keep it on your body for most of the day. This is the completed color. I don't mind the extra puffiness at the top. I feel like it gives you more oomph. So let me show you what we're going to do for the side band, because that's done as well. This is the mostly completed thigh band. As you can see by this string here, I am hand sewing my bow that I made into the back of the thigh band through the bowl. And basically what I definitely recommend is using a curved needle, because it can essentially curve around rather than just go straight. You'll have curved edges, so that way it wraps around the bow a few more times. And let me show y'all how to make lovely said bow here. This is not the bow we're using for our thigh, however, I'm redoing my cat bow. So to make the bow is really easy. You're going to make a strip as big as you want the bow to stretch out. Then you're going to take both ends, fold in like this, so that way it's right here, one laying over the other. Push this on top. Then you're going to gather. So as you can see, you get the start of your bow, and I wanted my cat bow to be kind of big. So then you can either hand sew or take another strip of ribbon, wrap this around so it holds the middle, and then I'll show you how to do the tails.
I recommend using zigzag scissors, aka pinking shears, to keep ribbons from fraying. Do a zigzag stitch to seal and cut with pinking shears again for frayless backside. For the tails, cross both sides like a support ribbon, then fold back on itself towards the center of the cross. Sew top edge and bottom edge, then hand sew the back of the bow.
This is the thigh band and the bow for our tail. The bow we're actually gonna, I know I said sew it on before but it didn't work, so we're gonna just hot glue this to the tail. And then next we're gonna show you how to do the bell for the lovely tail. So for the bell, I was gonna use styrofoam and paint it that way, but I figured there might be something in the store that's a little easier, so I went to the Christmas section of my Joann's craft store. They still had, luckily, some Christmas bells left, and I honestly was gonna go with the metal one that was like silver, but I decided to go for these black ones because if you paint them, it'll adhere to the color a lot better. So I got this mirror finished gold paint, which all essentially you're doing is just taking this outside, spraying it with the gold spray paint, and then you can attach it to the tail by either gluing it or possibly will sew into the bow itself through the little hoop here at the top. With the brooch first, and it's really, really simple. All you're gonna need is hot glue gun, a silicone, has to be silicone, mold, and some gold paint, as well as pink paint. Next, I got this UV Resin Craft silicone mold, and we're going to use this teardrop one here on the right. I know there's the little peg at the bottom, but that's okay, because we're going to be filling that hole once this whole thing cures. But what you're going to do is essentially take hot glue, you're going to layer it in, let it sit, I believe, for about 10 minutes or so. After it's completely dry and not sticky, you're going to pop it out of this. And yes, it will work, because I definitely tried this last night. Pop it out, and I'll show you what it looks like. This is how our gem came out. Essentially, after you pop it out, you can sand it down with a sandpaper or a sanding block to clean up the edges. Also take scissors, cut these extra edges off. Back into accessories, but we're almost done, I promise. So next, as I promised in our last video, we're going to paint our bell here, and we're going to paint our gem. Again, using the Rust-Oleum Mirror Finish Gold. So what you're going to do, you're going to take this outside, essentially paint one side, flip it over, paint the other side, same for this guy. However, before we take this guy outside, let me show you how to poke a hole in here. Real simple. So next you're going to just take a straight pen, like a sewing pen. You're going to essentially wiggle this guy through, as you can see here. Then what I just do, I just stretch it a little. You just want a hole big enough so that string can slide through. You'll pull it out, and then head to the painting. Hold your can from a few feet away and spray. Make sure you do both sides, so spray a little, let it dry, flip it over, spray, and dry again.
Here I'm hand sewing the bell to the ribbon. Start with knotting the thread and pulling it through the bow. Then use the needle to go through the loop of the bell and sew the thread back into the ribbon.
Lastly, to keep the bell secure, I'm just going to add a little bit of hot glue behind it, so that way it's less likely to fall off, but it's pretty tight. Next, we're going to work on the gloves. So this is where I stop, and honestly, with cosplay, you go however you want to go. As you can see by the manga here, her gloves match her outfit. However, if you look at the picture below that I normally keep on all my videos, her gloves are white. So, it just depends. Do you want to go cream, like I currently have, or do you want to go white? So, alright y'all, for the gloves, I attempted to sew them with satin, but I'm just not good at gloves. I've tried multiple times. So, I ended up buying a pair. This is just a pair of like stretchy cotton. Essentially what I'm gonna do is just add a strip of lace at the bottom and then give it the points, because if you try to make this out of satin is very loosely woven. It's tighter around the hands, so it's a little more tricky to make gloves out of, but that's the goal for these. Take the glove, you're gonna stretch it out, and then basically as you stretch it out, you're gonna pin it to the inside, go all the way around, sew it around, and you'll be good to go. These are how your gloves came out. I was going to cut the little triangle-ness, but I was like, nah, it'll match my necklace. Alrighty y'all, a little zoomed in for this part. But next I'm going to show you how to attach your lovely tag to the bottom of your collar. Essentially, for this next part, we're going to use some invisible thread. As you can see, it's very, very thin. You'll basically go through the hole that we made at the top of this earlier, right there. You'll take your curved needle and curve it into the middle. So what I do, I put it on, and then I either put a dot or at least hold it in the area that looks about the middle, and that's where you know exactly where your hands sew.
Here we're painting the symbols with acrylic paint. I'm using the smallest brush possible. If you get a pack of artist brushes, use the smallest size available.
this is gonna look like this. The last part we're gonna be working on is the armbands as well as her shoes. So first you're gonna start off with your Thighband pattern by Crystal's Cosplay Closet. You're gonna cut out 2 rectangles the exact same size as the pattern, and then you're going to take strips of elastic. You're going to put one on the top, one on the bottom, pin it all down, and then we're going to take it to our sewing machine and gather as we sew.
I'm using a sample piece here, but next step, pin down elastic and stretch it as you pin down. Watch my hands. When you begin to sew, stretch both sides as you sew down as well for a nice gather.
After you sew down your elastic, you're essentially going to take the outer edge here and fold it on top of the elastic, sew that down as well, do that for both sides. Then you're going to take both ends, fold them back, seal this up with a zigzag stitch so that way you don't have any loose threading as you see here.
Next, after sewing elastic, sew the edge of the fabric onto it as shown.
One last thing before the reveal, make sure before you turn everything inside out, you're going to try it on. I'll do this with you while I have you here. Really easy. You want it to have a nice snug against your arm, but nothing too tight where it bothers you. So this is my snug about now. As you can see towards the bottom, I have these little tails popping out. So let me show you a quick trick to get all that settled. So sometimes when you turn satin inside out, as you sew, it tends to de-ravel and cut, and you don't like that sort of thing. So to help with this, we're going to cut off any excess strings that are just in the way. Then you're just going to take a hot glue gun, leave a hot glue trail, and then that'll stop the underside from fraying. So, after you do all that, your results will look like this. So, they're tied up against my arm, but I mean, that's fine for me. You can make them more puffy if you want to keep the sizing of the actual pattern itself. And now, we will work on the shoes. Step 1, you're going to put on your boot and trace from the end of your boot to the top of your leg. And then once you trace that, mark off where you want the boot to end. So I want it to end probably about here, just on my shin. Then you're going to add seam allowance and cut it out. For seam allowance, I do about 1.5 inches all the way around, at max 2. When you're sewing the boot cover, you're using a zigzag stitch. So these are how my boots turned out. Oh my gosh, very excited, y'all. So last thing we're going to do is add soles to the bottom so we don't trip. And basically to clean up the look so that way you can't really see the buckles that these boots have. We'll just add more bows similar to the way the dress has over here. So the bottom of your shoe has traction. We're going to install what are called non-slip shoe pads. Essentially you just peel off the back here and stick it underneath. The fabrics that stick out at the bottom, I honestly just glued it on top of itself and kind of curved it in. So then you'll take the back off, stick this under, and that way the bottom of your shoe has a form of grip so you won't be sliding everywhere. The pack I have here is from Amazon. It only has the front end, so to cover up the back side you could use like a piece of foam, and generally that gave me a good amount of walking traction. So with putting foam underneath, I'd say just add some hot glue tracks so that way it has an actual grip portion. So since my heel is kind of flat, what I did, I took the heel, and as you can see I made an indentation in some foam. You'll just cut this out to that sizing. Doesn't need to be real big. Then again, glue this to the bottom of your shoe. Then on the bottom of this, on this side, you're going to put some glue tracks just so your shoe has grip. And these are the shoes. So darn cute. Oh my gosh. So let me show you what it looks like along with the outfit. And voila! This is everything in its entirety. Oh my gosh, you guys, we did it! From this point, if you have any further questions about creating this character or help with any Mew Mew creations at all, please feel free to contact me. All of the tutorial for Mew Berry will be in my bio. It will be under the collections tab, and there will be a section that says Mew Berry tutorial where you can look at the whole entire tutorial in full.